We received a phone call regarding 3 horses that were in South Carolina, one of which had a severe leg deformity. And our veterinarian immediately knew the right place to take her, to a place called Root and Riddle Equine Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky.
The horse had a really bad, what we call carpal valgus deformity or knock-knee. So it's pretty routine for us to see ones like that of different severity, and obviously this one was a little bit more severe. But it's a surgery we do pretty commonly here to help correct their deformities. They got her up here, and then once we saw her in person and once we got the radiographs taken, we realized that it wasn't going to be quite as simple and straightforward as we had hoped.
The surgeon said that it's one of the worst cases he'd ever seen, and that if she was his horse, he would put her down.
Well, eventually she probably would have continued to break down that leg, and then as she gets heavier and heavier, she would have overloaded her other limb, and that would have probably started to break down. And you would have probably eventually ended up putting that horse down at some period of time.
Jay and I agonized over it. I mean, we didn't know what to do. I mean, here's this year-old horse, she's just a baby, and if we could just fix her leg, she could have so many years of a wonderful life ahead of her. So we decided, we got a donor to cover the airfare, and Jay and I decided to fly to Kentucky to meet Worthy and to sit face-to-face with the surgeon and really try to come to a decision. The minute we met her, we just knew we had to try something for her. She had such a strong, strong life force, and we thought there is no way we're going to give up on this horse. If we're going to fail, then we're going to fail trying.
There were 3 horses, though. We found that it was most important to make sure that at least one of them went with her to Kentucky. With horses, and just like any other being, once they're bonded, once they're connected to another being, you don't want to break that bond. With respect to Worthy and Indy, she was playing a mother figure for Worthy, and we thought it was very important that she continue through the process of her healing with her.
And the surgeon agreed. He said, look, you know, if you guys are totally cognizant of the risks, I am willing to try.
Windswept angular limb deformity is a very easy thing to correct in a young horse. But when you're working with an older horse, it's a very intense procedure.
Basically her growth plate was totally squashed. I mean, there was no growth left. And so we had nothing to manipulate to get the leg back straight. You know, the horse is going to need what we call wedge osteotomy, where we actually had to take a pie-shaped piece of bone out of her leg in order to get it straight.
So she was taken into surgery, and we all held our breath. They actually had to cut the leg in half and then cut a wedge out of it and then put it back so it stood straight.
They have to secure the limb with screws and plates to be able to hold it in place, because once the horse is done with the procedure, has to immediately jump up and be able to walk from the surgical room back to the stall. And we were very concerned about her weight. We were concerned that she wasn't going to be able to pull through the surgery because she was so malnourished. And so finding a way to boost her spirits and get things to sort of a happier place for her was really important before you go through a major surgery like what she was going to have to go through. But we have a lot of nutritional supplements that we can turn to really make a difference in an animal's recovery.
She woke up. She recovered from anesthesia, and she stood up, and she actually walked out of surgery back to the stall with Indy.
Well, the surgery went well. According to Dr. Ruggles, the surgery went fine, but that's just the first step. The next phase is how well she does afterwards, keeping her comfortable, and minimizing any chance of an infection.
Does she spike a fever? Are the pins going to hold? How is she going to manage her pain? There were so many factors that we weren't even allowed to get excited that the surgery was successful.
We believe Chris to be the brother. You know, we didn't see the same connection between him and Worthy, so we thought that it would be okay to leave him behind and then reconnect them after the procedure. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was the pasture that Chris was in wasn't very strong, and he ended up getting through it. And just behind where he was were 10 miles square of woods. He ran into the woods and basically reverted back to wild horse and was impossible to catch. He was creating a public hazard by running down the middle of the street towards cars and things like that, and learning that the sheriff was going to have to take action if we weren't able to capture him. So I flew out there. We were able to get a hold of a mare, and we were able to lure him into a round pen. I felt so responsible and so compelled to find him, because what a tragedy it would be if he ended up having to be put down out in the woods, not knowing that he was going to be reconnected with his sisters.
You know, sometimes there are animals that are so depressed and in so much pain that really the kindest thing to do is to let them go gently. But more often than not, you have animals who have strong spirits that are wanting to stay in their bodies and are wanting to live and thrive and just need a little help.
We had a lot of faith, and we had a lot of support from a lot of people who have a lot of faith. We understood that the first 2 weeks was the most crucial, but we stayed positive, and she made it through.
Good girl, Worthy. Good girl, yeah.
After this last cast came off, we moved into a splint. While she's in pasture, they'll come and they'll check it and they'll make sure that everything's okay.
With each week that passed by, we got more and more excited until eventually the doctor said, you know what? We did it. She's a normal horse.
One of the most important things to us was that moment where we could reconnect Chris, Worthy, and Indy. We knew what was going to happen. We knew that they were going to get put back together, but they didn't. That moment where Chris, Worthy, and Indy got to go into a pasture and see each other for the first time was one of the most amazing feelings.
I think Worthy's story is important for many reasons. She's an example of how sometimes great things happen when we don't give up. I shudder to think, oh my God, can you imagine? We were this close to putting her down. We were this close to giving up on her. And now that her leg is healed, she's going to spend the rest of her life at the Gentle Barn working with special needs kids, people who have challenges in their own lives, and she's going to be their inspiration.